A very pleasant good day to all of our viewers, those of you who are joining on our YouTube platforms, SLC Adventist and SLC Church channel, and to those of you who are listening via Second Advent Radio. We welcome you to another edition of Let's Talk. Let's Talk is a program sponsored by the Southwood Conference of Seventh Adventists. And of course, we discuss relevant issues pertinent to the members and the wider community. We started recently, last week, in fact, some of you would remember last week, we were interviewing Dr. James Daniel, retired president and education officer for the Caribbean Union of Seventh Adventists. Quite an intriguing discussion we had with him. We're continuing that series today. And today we have a very special guest. Before I introduce our guest today, we would like to invite you to bow your heads with us for a word of prayer, shall we? Almighty Father and our God, we give you thanks for the opportunity to come into the homes of our members and viewers around the Caribbean and the wider Adventist world. We thank you for the opportunity to discuss, and especially today as we talk to one who has given a lifetime of service to your church. Grant that the information presented will prove inspirational. Have your own way and be with us as we discuss. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, friends, we are grateful for the opportunity to come into your homes, whether you are listening in your vehicles as you drive the streets of Antigua, Barbuda, St. Kitts, Nevis, Montserrat. If you're listening to Second Advent Radio, we welcome you. We know that many of you, even though you may not be a member of the church, you tune in to Second Advent Radio. We're happy to be with you. And for those of you who are joining via our social media pages, welcome just the same. We are talking today with a gentleman who has been around. He has been around. You will understand what I mean by that in a little while, because many, many years ago, when I became a Seventh Adventist, I heard of this gentleman, Elder George Brown. Just to let you know, on January 11 of this year, 2024, Elder Brown celebrated his 100th birthday. So, Elder Brown, good afternoon. It's a delight to be with you. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Well, I'm certainly delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you. And I hope that both our listeners and we ourselves will be benefited from this interview. What a delight it is to be with you.
I want to say up front, when I grow up, I want to be like you. You know, I want to be in my right mind at 100 years of age and to be so reflective and collective. I'll tell you this, you know, of course, you know that I had my admin assistant call you just to double check to make sure you got the correspondences, etc. And yes. The first time she spoke with you, she came off the phone and she said, wow, he is so articulate. I can't believe it. You know, she was blown away. It's a delight. We are going to be talking to you about your experiences. We are going to allow you in the course of the conversation to share a bit about yourself. However, I do want to let our viewers know that Elder Brown has been, first let you know that he was born in the Dominican Republic. He spent some of his childhood years in Antigua. He will tell you about that. But he has served as a Seventh Adventist minister, and he last served as president of the Inter-American Division. When I became a pastor in 1992, when I started my internship 32 years ago, Elder Brown was the president of the Inter-American Division. And here I am talking with him. He retired in 1993, 31 years ago, and he's still alive, still well. Elder Brown, it's a delight to have you with us this afternoon. Can you tell us about your early years, just a bit about your early years?
Yes, well, I am what we know as a third generation Seventh-day Adventist. As you already mentioned, I was born in the Dominican Republic. My father was from the island of Antigua, beautiful island of Antigua. And he went into that, to the Dominican Republic, and he met a very lovely lady who eventually became his wife, and my mother. He had a family of four, two boys and one girl. But unfortunately, my mother died when I was very young. As a matter of fact, I hardly knew her. So after she died, he decided that he would return back to his home in Antigua. And around 1935, that's when the world was young, and I was younger. He returned to Antigua and took his family there. We went to the village of Liberta, where I became very much connected with the Liberta Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that gives you a brief background. This was about 1935, long time ago.
A very long time ago indeed. 1935. Oh, wow. My mother in 1935, let me see, my mother would have been a teenager.
Yes.
At that time. Yes, certainly. So you had early connections to the Seventh Adventist Church. Can you remember when you were baptized, and what were the circumstances that led to you committing your life to God?
Yes. I was quite young, and I'll tell you a little later on about my experience in the Liberta Church. And I should say up front that I am today what I am to a great extent because of what I learned as a boy growing up in the Liberta Church in Antigua. I could write a book on it. In those days we had just one pastor pastoring the entire island, and the pastor that pastored the island at that time was A.E. Riley. He is originally from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. And during his ministry there, he did a great deal to encourage young people to be faithful. And one of the things that really meant a great deal to me was that I found in the Liberta Church a very active missionary volunteer society. Now, some young people today will wonder what that was. But in that MV society, we had weekly meetings. We had opportunities of all kinds to study. And I became a member of the baptismal class. In those days, we had a standard baptismal class in all of our churches, preparing individuals for membership in the Adventist family. So during that time, I learned a great deal about Adventism, what it all meant. I had a burden to give my heart to the Lord, made a decision to be baptized, and was baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I have fond memories of that baptism in Falmouth Bay. A large number of young people were baptized at that time. And so that gives you a little idea of how far back my experience goes and when I was baptized.
Yeah, it's so inspirational just listening to you. You mentioned just now that when you became engaged in the Seventh Adventist Church, one of the things that proved meaningful to you in your spiritual development was the MV Society, the Missionary Volunteer Society. These days we have what is known as AY, Adventist Ministry. Just so that the younger people who are listening can make the connection. When I became a Seventh Adventist, remnants of MV was still there. In fact, the name had officially changed by then, but we took a long time to catch on to it. So I got a taste of what MV was. It's really just a name change, really. But I want to go on from there. You have been involved as a young person in the MV Society. A little bit of church life, if you compare church life back then to now, or at least to a few years then, you retired in I believe 1993. But over the years, what kind of changes have you seen in terms, you mentioned a baptismal class that was in every church as a standard. There are many congregations these days that do not have a baptismal class. So what are some of the differences that you have detected over the years?
Yes, but back to the missionary volunteer situation. In those days, the meetings were attended not only by young people who were primarily the ones concerned, but and I have very fond memories of this. So many fathers and mothers, senior citizens, adult members, also attended those meetings. And as young men and women, many of us in our early teens, we were given opportunities to give Bible studies. And when I say give Bible studies, I don't mean to half a dozen people, but to a whole church. We rendered music, we gave talks, we had a wonderful experience in fellowship and discipleship. We worked together. So it was a very inspiring thing. And as I said earlier, I would never have achieved what I have in this life had it not been for the foundation that I got and in those days. And I should add, Doctor, that in those days, Adventists were very poorly regarded in Antigua. We were mocked, laughed at, ridiculed, called cults, and all the rest of it. I remember the days when we would go to church hiding our hymn books and our Bibles because we were laughed at and jeered and mocked by the community. We were not well respected. And about 25 years after that, when I went to Antigua for one of those big meetings, I was amazed at the recognition given to our people in Antigua, which shows how well the church has grown and developed and impacted the community with the gospel.
Indeed. In fact, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because this morning, I preached at a church in Antigua this morning, the Bible Speaks Seventh Adventist Church. That was not nearly in existence when you were around. But I was sharing with the brethren that there was a time when it was difficult being a Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was sharing with them, I was in Montserrat last weekend, and I was sharing with them that there in Montserrat, I was interfacing with a government minister last Friday, and it was getting late. And so I asked her, when does the government ministries close on Montserrat? And she said 4 o'clock every day. And I mentioned in Antigua, the government offices close at 3 p.m. on Fridays. And she said, oh, the Adventists have an hour to go home and prepare for the Sabbath. It's interesting. There was that time when Adventism was conned, and if in my day, let alone in your day, so certainly. I want to press on, because the time goes by so very quickly. But you were not just involved in church as a young person. Oh, I wanted to ask you this. While you were speaking just now, my mind kind of drifted. You said that the AY Society, had fathers and mothers and seniors, etc. So you're describing a scene there as though Sabbath was pretty much an all-day event, because
that is correct.
Nowadays, if church runs a little late, people would leave and go and say, it's too long, and you don't see them on Sabbath afternoons. They do what we call lay activities. So you are describing a situation where everybody pretty much seemed to have returned to church on Sabbath afternoons.
That's correct. And let me tell you something that your audience needs to hear. we were asked as young people to participate, and as we participated, the seniors, the adult members, the church leaders were always there to motivate and affirm and encourage us. And I'll never forget the very first time I gave a Bible study. I was terribly nervous. And even now, so many years thereafter, I still remember what I went through. But at the end of that presentation, and I want you to listen carefully to this, because this means a lot. One of the mothers in Israel came over to me, put her arms around me, and said to me, "George, you have done a wonderful job. You did very well. And I want you to know that we are encouraging you to keep going forward the way that you are now, because one day you are going to be a minister of the gospel." Now, nothing was further from my mind than that. But here it is. Her wish for me was fulfilled. And that's a story all by itself. It was fulfilled because she and many others took the opportunity to encourage, to motivate, and to inspire young people to go forward in faith.
Amen. Amen. And Elder Brown, it's interesting that you shared that testimony, because my next question really is about what inspired you to become a pastor. You mentioned that there was one pastor when you became, on the island. So what led you to want to? I know this sister, this mother in Zion, encourage you when it was not on your mind. But can you share what were some of the circumstances that led to you deciding, I want to spend my life serving God in this way?
Yeah, I listened very carefully as a young man to visitors, pastors, and others who came to our church. I listened to their presentation. I took notes and outlines and all the rest of it. And I got the burden that somehow or another I can one day be able to become a minister of the gospel and bring men and women to Christ, show them the way. And I tried everything I could to fulfill that dream, but I was very lacking in material success. I didn't have the wherewithal financially. As a matter of fact, from a human point of view, there was no possibility of me ever going to school, though almost every Sabbath somebody would say, "When are you going to CUC?" And I would say, "Well, one of these days the Lord will provide." I watched Elder Riley, and then subsequently I watched Elder N.C. Gooding, who became very close to me, one of my mentors. And he invited me to do something that I never expected. He invited me to be his song leader for his evangelistic crusade. He invited me to be the one conducting the Bible class night after night. And by the way, in those days, evangelistic meetings lasted for 3 months. And as I got involved, the more I got involved, the more I felt that there was need out there in the world for young men to help develop a situation in the church where we would bring new individuals into the faith. And driven by that, I decided that regardless of the circumstances, I was going to do everything possible to become a minister of the gospel. And I'll tell you how that happened. I had no money. And one day, someone said to me from the conference who was visiting, George, there is a program known as the Student Colportery. And we are going to send you to the island of Barbados. This is brand new to me. I never thought of that. So in 1947, I went into Barbados to canvass, and did that for a year in order to obtain funds to go to Caribbean Training College then. And by January of 1948, I was able to arrive at the campus of Caribbean Training College to begin studying for the ministry. And that's it. That's a very brief history.
You know, Elder, I am so inspired by what you're saying. You know, I glanced at the chat on one of our YouTube channels, and I see individuals commenting. Somebody said that you were the one that baptized them. There's a Henrietta Bramble said you impacted their life while they were in then CUC, and led to their baptism, etc. You have touched so many persons over the years, and that truly is amazing. So you eventually made it to Caribbean Union College.
Yes.
By God's providence, and you became a pastor. In those days, the conference was, I imagine, a pretty vast territory, because you mentioned when you were going to Colportery, when you went to Barbados, that was known as East Caribbean Conference, or was it the Leeward Islands Conference?
It was the Leeward Islands Conference.
Leeward Islands Conference, yes.
Yes.
And that included Barbados, Dominica, and now we have Caribbean Conference, we have North Caribbean Conference, we have South Leeward Conference. So the work has developed over the years, and we
wonderfully.
Indeed. Now, Elder, can you share some information on your service in the church? Where have you been? Where have you served? In what capacity have you served?
All right. After spending 5 years at Caribbean Union College, I graduated, and by the way, the same year, I got married, and we were called to serve in ministry in the island of Tortola. That's the British Virgin Islands, as you know. And that's a story by itself. The church was in a very, very poor condition, physically and spiritually, and the morale was very low. But the Lord blessed wonderfully. We had, one of the first things I did was to have a crusade. And the Lord blessed. In that crusade, we had over 36 individuals gave their lives to Jesus Christ. And I felt so blessed when I saw so many of those individuals go to college and themselves become workers in the cause of God. From Barbados, from Tortola, I was invited to go to St. Croix to pastor the church there. And after a few years, I received an invitation from Caribbean Union College, my alma mater, to serve as Dean of Men at the college and to be a teacher in the Bible class there. What a wonderful opportunity that was to form characters, to work with so many brilliant young people from all over the Caribbean. Worked with them, we had good experiences together. And even now, I can think of so many of them that are in the work of the Lord right now. because of the opportunity I had to serve in that capacity. And I served in that capacity for about, it was a little over 5 years. And I felt the need for further preparation in order to better carry out the work of the Lord in that region. So I was granted a bursary, which took me to North Caribbean College in Jamaica, where I got my BTH, and then from there to Andrews University for a master's in systematic theology. So I returned to Trinidad and at the college and taught there for several years. This is one of the most unforgettable experiences of my life. I had students from Antigua and Barbados and from all over the Caribbean in our Bible classes, in our Greek classes, public speaking, and all the rest of it. It was a marvelous experience for me to be able to bless so many young people from all over the Caribbean Union. So I served in that capacity. And then I was called to be the youth and education director of the Caribbean Union.
Before you go on to talking about your experience as youth and education director of the Caribbean Union, I just want to take you back a little bit, because I'm reflecting, while you were Dean of Men and you were teaching in Caribbean Union College, you got a bursary to Jamaica.
That is correct.
And you completed your BTH.
Yes.
But earlier you mentioned that when you went to CUC, at first you spent 5 years. Is it that you completed secondary school and then went on to do the 2-year program?
Exactly. And you're correct. I had, that's a story by itself too, because I didn't have much of an opportunity as a youngster growing up. But I went there, passed all the examinations, and concluded or completed my secondary work, and then went on for the diploma that was then given in ministry.
Okay, and then so my interruption took you from saying about your experience as youth director. I believe you are now being called to be youth and education director, was it?
Youth and education director, yeah. And that was a wonderful experience. Camp meetings and youth Bible conferences and so many other activities and all the young people. Only a few days ago, I got a text from one of the individuals who was a camper at one of our camps, by the way, in Antigua. And she was there reminiscing and expressing appreciation for the blessings she received and the motivation she got to go forward and become a leader in God's church. I think of Roy Adams. I think of so many of those young people that I had the opportunity of teaching in various classes. So it is a wonderful thing. Now, as missionary volunteer and education leader, I had a broader field of service. And the Lord blessed. We had a wonderful time together, and so many young people gave their hearts to the Lord and are today workers in the cause of God.
So you when you were education director and youth director, was it for the conference or for the union?
The union, the Caribbean Union.
Caribbean Union.
The Caribbean Union, yes.
So when were you called to serve the Inter-American Division?
All right. And before I answer that question, I have never really seen myself fitting into any of these responsibilities. Each time that I was invited, to me, it was a miracle. Anyway, I responded. So I was called after I came back from Andrews University and taught at the college, and then got into educational and youth work. A situation developed at my alma mater. One of those unfortunate situations. And in the middle of the school year, they lost the president. There was a very unpleasant situation there. And I remember sitting on the college board, and somebody leaned over to me and said, "Now, we are going to nominate you to be president of the Caribbean Union College." Oh, that nearly gave me a cardiac arrest. In any case, I prayed about it, accepted the invitation, and went to Caribbean Union to serve as its president, and did that for a year. But in 1966, I was invited to be a candidate at the General Conference in Detroit. And while there, one midday, a gentleman came to me and said, "The nominating committee has just asked me to contact you because you have been nominated to serve as the youth director of the Inter-American Division." And as you know, Doctor, the Inter-American Division is a vast territory from Mexico, 7 republics of Central America, all of the Caribbean, the northern tip of South America, Venezuela, Colombia, and all those countries. And I was asked to serve as the youth director of that vast territory. But I promised the Lord that wherever he called me, I would go, regardless of the circumstances.
Amen. Amen. Wow. That's amazing. The Inter-American Division is not just large, but it is predominantly Spanish.
Yes.
I'm assuming your early years in the Dominican Republic allowed you to be able to converse freely in Spanish.
Well, it gave me a foundation. Because when I got the invitation to serve as the youth director of the Inter-American Division, I had to do some brushing up on my Spanish and so forth, but the foundation was there. So we had a marvelous time in our colleges, in camp meetings. My finest years in ministry were the years of working with and for the youth of the Inter-American Division. Unforgettable experiences. And today, when I see so many young people still in the work of God who came in during my ministry, it makes me very grateful to the Lord for having given me the opportunity to serve in that capacity. Now, so there I was, and I served there for 2 terms as youth director. And in 1975, at the General Conference session, I was invited to serve as the field secretary of the Inter-American Division. Again, I accepted that responsibility. It was administrative, and I was closely associated with Elder B.L. Archbold, who was then the president. We had a marvelous time together in soul winning. And the emphasis then was winning souls for Christ, retaining them in the church, and helping to advance the cause of God, not only in Inter-America, but around the world. In 1980, at another General Conference session, I was given the surprise of my life when asked to serve as the president of the Inter-American Division. And I'll tell you a few things about my ministry there a little later on.
Now, it's interesting. I became a Seventh Adventist in 1980.
Oh, really?
Yes. Wow. And that year, you know, I remember that my very early recollections as a young man, a teenager, back in 1980, going to Pathfinders, we had to say who the president of the Inter-American Division was, you know, so that not only were you the president of the division when I became a pastor, but you were the president of the Inter-American Division that year I got baptized. Now, my baptism was in July, and I'm assuming that the the general conference session may have been in June or thereabout. I can't remember.
June, July, yes.
Yes, yes. So just about at the start of your service as president of the Inter-American Division, I became a Seventh Adventist. And here we are, wow, 44 years after or thereabouts. And you are still collective, still strong. I tell you, when I grow up, I want to be like you.
That's what my doctor tells me every time I go there.
Oh, it's truly amazing, Elder. Now, I do want to ask you about your division presidency, because you know, we have people from around the Caribbean. In fact, we have people outside of the Caribbean listening. We do have people from France listening, people from the UK listening, people from North America listening. But you served as president. Now, it occurred to me, you said that you never had aspirations for these kinds of things. These days, I talk to young pastors, and it seems, fortunately, unfortunately, so many persons who can't wait until they become a director, can't wait until they become president. You know, it is inspiring to know that you had no aspirations, you were just serving the Lord, and you never campaigned for any position, but God placed you where he wanted you. That, to me, is very noble.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so in the greatest challenge of my life, of course, was to serve in the capacity as president of that vast, challenging, but wonderful division. And as you know, we have the challenges of ethnicity and the political divisions. It is a division. Well, that's an interesting name, really. It is a division of divisions, and there is the political aspect, there is the social aspect, there is the ethnic aspect, and there are so many other factors that would cause to break up the unity of that great division. And one of my greatest challenges, and I thank God for the power of the Holy Spirit in servant leadership that will help us to know how to handle situations like those that I handled there, with these tensions, ethnic tensions, linguistic tensions, and so forth. But in spite of all those constant challenges, the Lord blessed in marvelous ways. And I will never forget when the Inter-American Division became the very first division of the World Church to baptize over 100,000 members in a single year. That became a great source of inspiration to the World Church. And I remember the annual councils and other of those big meetings of the various divisions, how they all wanted to know, how do you do that? Well, I reminded them, it is not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of God that these things are accomplished.
That's right.
One of the things we did, Doc, was to organize something known as the Festival of the Laity. Festival of the Laity. That was introduced, and that challenged, inspired, and motivated thousands of lay people around the division to be involved in evangelism. That changed the whole picture in the Inter-American Division. And then one of the other wonderful experiences that transformed Adventism in Inter-America and the world was when IAD became the first division in the world field to reach a membership of 1 million members. What a day of rejoicing that was. But I reminded the believers then that there is more land yet to be discovered. Mm. And so we went forward, so that by the time I retired in 1993, we had 1.5 million members. Our motto was win, train, and retain. And because of that, the membership grew, institutions grew, and the Inter-American Division continues to be one of the great divisions of the world field.
I want to pick up on your motto, win, train, and retain. We are having a challenge in the world church today with respect to retention. When I look at the statistics coming out of the General Conference, you know, the 1965, when they started keeping record statistical information with respect to membership gains and losses, to present, there is about a 40% loss ratio. And if we go over the last 10 years, it's even higher. That's alarming. And you're mentioning that the motto was win, train, and retain. And it's interesting that that was the motto, because not only are we concerned about bringing people to Jesus, we have to be concerned about the individual development of these members.
Absolutely.
You retired in 1993,
yeah,
when the division's membership was 1.5 million plus. Of course, that's 31 years ago, and since then we have gone to 2 million plus, and I think 3 million something now.
3 million plus, yeah.
Yes, so we give God thanks for that. But you know, Elder, you must have had some challenges, some difficult things to deal with. Navigating that vast landscape is one of them. What were some of the more challenging things that you had to address as a president?
Well, to maintain the unity of the division.
Oh, okay.
Maintain the unity of the division. And one of the other challenges has to do with the third word in that motto, the retention. How you know, it is very easy to go out and win individuals, accessions to the church.
Mm-hmm.
How to retain them is another thing. And one of the things we did was to seek to establish a situation where when members came into the church, well, before they even came into the church, they were prepared for the evangelistic activities. After they were baptized, there is a continuous program of training and education and discipleship and nurturing. And if that isn't done, then we will lose a lot of members. One of the problems we're having in our church today, and I was reading an article just a few days ago that's alarming, is that we have developed within recent times and I don't want to be misunderstood with this one, but we have developed some very short-term evangelistic outreach, very short-term, few days. And in those few days, we don't have time to really prepare candidates for baptism. And if that continues, we are going to have a lot of members coming into the church who are really minimal Adventists. By that I mean, they would have made a profession, they love the Lord and all the rest of it, all the good things. But what do they know about our message? Do they know our history, where we have come from, why we're here, where we are going? That's one of the things that troubles me, that too many of our recent converts now don't know what they ought to know about our faith as a church.
Well, Elder, recently, before I started this series on conversations with retired presidents, I was in conversation on this Let's Talk program with one of our very outstanding evangelists in the Caribbean.
Yes.
That is Roosevelt Daniel.
Yes.
And he indicated that I did ask him specifically about the shortening of the time we have for our evangelistic meetings. Because I remember working with him as a young pastor in some of his crusades, and there were 8 weeks.
Yes.
These days they're doing 2-week campaigns, 1-week campaigns. And so what you're speaking to there is real. Now, you indicated a few minutes ago, towards the start of this program, that when you did that campaign, was it Gooden who invited you to, Pastor Goodings, I believe you mentioned, who invited
Yes.
you to be his song leader, and you said in those days crusades used to be for 3 months.
That's
So
correct.
there was a move from 3 months to 2 months to 6 weeks to 4 weeks to 1 week. And I'm personally concerned. The other thing you mentioned is that the folks come in, there was this baptismal class, and sometimes out of an evangelistic crusade, the people go into a baptismal class even before baptism. Nowadays, the emphasis seems to be, in fact, I am seeing people, starting a crusade on Sunday night and baptizing on Tuesday night, under the tent, the same night. That's a concern of mine likewise, but we have limited time. So let me ask you another question. This may be a challenging question, but you're retired, so you can speak. Now, you are president of the Inter-American Division. At the time when you retired, in fact, the membership was 1.5. We have 3 predominant languages. We have more, but predominant languages. We have French, we have Spanish, and we have English. Of course, the Spanish is significantly more than any of the others. Right now, we have 24 unions, and I think 18 of them are Spanish. So that gives us an idea. And I'm very grateful personally for the development of the work. In my own ministry, I was instrumental in organizing Spanish congregations. To some extent, I predated the one in Antigua, the Spanish congregation in Tortola. You worked in Tortola. I also worked in Tortola.
Really?
Yes, that's right. And I did some work with a Spanish congregation we had in Nevis some years ago. So I do have a love for the language there. But the question is, do you see a time when the division will subdivide and perhaps we have a Spanish division, an English-speaking division, maybe English and French? Do you see that happening?
That's such an interesting question. During my administration, one of the struggles that we went through was precisely that. There were some folk from the English-speaking section who are determined by as we say in colloquialism, by the hook or the crook. We are going to have this division divided. So we have the English, we have the French, and we have the Spanish. My feeling has been, as I looked at all the aspects of it, Inter-America is what it is today because of its linguistic composition. This division has been an inspiration to the world field. So one of the things I had to work with over and over again was to discourage and dissuade people from getting into this regional division of the world of the division. Now, it may be, my friend, that down the road before the Lord comes, and I hope that he comes soon, but down the road, it may become necessary to have a division of some kind. But to divide the division linguistically into 3 would not be the best thing, really.
Thanks
the combination.
Yes.
People have said from around the world, how do you folk get along so well with all those divisions in the field? Unity in diversity. Yeah.
Now our church struggles sometimes with various divides, racial divides, linguistic divides, etc. So I see wisdom in in working together. There is an emphasis, however, on subdivision of territories within the division. As you know, one time we had Leeward Islands Conference, and then we had East Caribbean Conference, and then North Caribbean Conference coming out of that, and South Leeward Conference coming out of that. So as the work grows, it develops. Perhaps, I'm just saying perhaps, sometime in the future, you know, they may need, I know Mexico, for example, has 5 unions, I think, 3 or 5 unions. And they may be saying, well, it's time for Mexico to separate and be its own division. But that's another dynamic. Let me ask you something in the 9 minutes that we have remaining. Could you believe it moves so quickly? What would you describe as some of your, now you have already mentioned some very significant milestones. You have mentioned, for example, when the division attained 100,000 baptisms in 1 year, you know, when we got to 1 million, etc. But as you look back, because we don't have a lot of time, as you look back over the years, look at the church today. What concerns you most about Adventism today?
Not just the division.
Not just the division.
No.
The church.
A good question. And this interview would not be helpful if it didn't have that question too, you know. I see so much in our church today that gives me encouragement. We have a more educated leadership. We have great institutions and all the rest of it, and so forth and so on. I could name so many things. But there is a trend today where there is an emphasis or a trend towards secularism in our church. Secularism. We just had a crusade here just not very long ago, where in about 6 or 7 days, people were baptized and not a single subject presented had anything to do with the fundamentals of our faith. But they were psychological, they were inspirational, and all the rest of it. So that secular approach to our preaching has to be dealt with. In some of our churches, our pastors don't expound the word with a focus on Christ. But there's a tendency to be so secular in their presentation. And you wonder, where is Christ? Is he being substituted by psychology and all the rest of it? So that's one thing, secularism. The other one is institutionalism. We have the finest institutions today, state of the art in the medical, in the educational, and so forth and so on. But you know, we must not forget that the Adventist Church is a movement. We began as a movement, we must continue as a movement, and we will end as a movement. And God does not inspire institutions. His Holy Spirit inspires men and women who are dedicated to him to advance his cause. So we need to guard against secularism, against institutionalism, and of course, there's another third evil that concerns me, and that is what I call the Laodicean situation, the Laodicean apathy, where we have done so much already. We have such great institutions, and we are around the world now, and we don't need anything anymore now. We can rest, relax. These are dangers we must guard against. And another thing, and I know time is fleeting, but another thing is it is known as the AI, artificial intelligence. We need to watch that. Right now, we have those who are advocating AI almost as a substitute for the living preacher. These things must be guarded against. And I don't know how much time we have left, but you know, there was a speech made by Dr. Richard Halverson, who was the General Assembly leader of the Presbyterian Church. And I leave this with you. It's very interesting. He said, when the church started in the beginning, that's the Christian church, it was a growing fellowship of men and women who were consecrated to Jesus Christ. And then the church moved to Greece, where it became a philosophy. Then the church moved to Rome, where it became an institution. Next, it moved around Europe, where it became a culture. And finally, it moved to North America, where it became an enterprise. And that's the death of the church. So we must remember that we have a movement. It started as a movement and must go on as a movement until the end of time.
You know, Elder, the four areas that you identified there, each one of them, you know, we could spend an hour talking about
Absolutely.
any one of them. So, I mean, they're very real concerns, very serious concerns. And I pray that we, you know, I don't know which would be my most pressing issue. There's another area that I just want to add to that, because since COVID, you know, we have seen some challenges there, but, you know, this matter of online church and people not wanting to assemble together is concerning to me as well, because if I can stay home and watch church, then I don't have to go. And I'm let me just say that I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know, I am.
And your concern is justified. Absolutely. And that's one of my big concerns. And when I talked about the AI, that's included in all of that. But we have, you know, one of the churches I go to here, there are some folk who since COVID have not put foot in church once.
Yeah.
And my friend, there is no substitute to the face-to-face proclamation of the gospel.
Amen.
No substitute whatsoever. No amount of radio or television or internet can substitute for the face-to-face proclamation of the gospel, touching people's lives.
So true, Elder. Now, Elder, our time has expired. I have one more question to ask you, however. You know, again, when I listen to you, I'm looking at some comments in the chat, and the folks are so amazed that you are so alert, so collective. Your memory seems so clear. You know, if my division and union folks, my union president normally listens to this program, and they may be thinking maybe we should carry the retirement age to 70. You know? But my final question is,
yes,
how is retirement and how engaged have you been since retirement?
I've been very much engaged. You know, I've spoken in almost every division, camp meetings, college weekly prayers and so forth, in the Philippines, in Africa, in so many other places. Here in my local church, I have taught a Sabbath school class, a large class, and it's online as well. I've taught that for 29 years, every Sabbath. I have conducted more funerals and weddings since my retirement that I did during my active services. It's amazing. And during the time, I've written 2 books, Portraits of Jesus and The Fruit of the Spirit. Written several articles, spoken for the General Conference, Annual Council, and other meetings. So been kept very, very busy. Kept busy all the time. And there's no substitute for study and being busy. Remain doing the work of the Lord until he comes. And one of the things that I do is to exercise. Every day I walk. I used to walk 5 miles a day. Now at 100, I had to reduce that to half, you know, so 2.5 miles a day. But I still keep busy. I have to use a cane once in a while because of some problem with my right knee, but I'm still alive and kicking. And I tell the saints that as long as the Holy Spirit keeps one vertical, keep working. I just spoke today at one of our large churches here for the divine service, and we had a wonderful time together. Stay busy all the time, intellectually, physically, and spiritually.
Elder Brown, thank you so much. Friends, I've been talking to Elder George Brown. He is a centenarian, 100 years. As you heard him say, he is engaged, he's involved, he's serving. He preached at the Divine Service Hour today in his church there. It was a real pleasure. Elder, we appreciate it so much. I hope I can have you back one of these days for us to continue, because there's so many other things we did not talk about. Friends, next week, we're going to have another retired president. We're going to be talking with Pastor Danforth Francis. He has a wealth of experience. He spent a number of years as a missionary over in Africa, and he is from Barbados. His wife is from Antigua, just so that you may know that. And we're going to be talking with him. We have other presidents lined up, John Josiah, Silton Brown, and Clinton Lewis, etc. They're coming later. And perhaps what we can do for a final session is to have all of them on one program.
Wonderful.
Up to their availability. Well, Elder, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. It has been inspirational. I'm going to, in my spare time, go back on YouTube and listen to this program again, because the wisdom that you spoke today is so outstanding. God bless you. It was a real pleasure having you.
And thank you. The delight was mine. Thank you for the invitation. And God bless you. Our prayers are with you in your challenging responsibilities in your conference. God bless you. Keep the good work going.
God bless. Friends, next week, 3 p.m., same time.